Chapter 201. A prediction for the followers of Jesus. Mary, Eudokia, and James were also among those who were told to leave. But Mary nevertheless went in, and Eudokia and James followed her. And Mary bent down to the little child and said, "Listen, my little son, you are really being terribly strict. If you already turn me away from the door now, what will you do with me when you become a man? See, you must not be that strict with her who carried you under her heart with great fear and much suffering." Hereupon the little child looked at Mary in an indeed loving but also earnest way and asked, "How is it that you call me your little son? Do you not recall what the angel said to you? How shall you call that which was born of you? See, the angel said, 'And what will be born of you will be called God's Son, the Son of the Most High.' Since it certainly was that way and not otherwise, how then do you call me your little son? If I were your son, you would concern yourself more with me than with Talia. But since I am not your son, it follows that Talia is closer to your heart than I. If I play around outside somewhere and then come back in through the door, not a soul meets me with a flaming heart. And I am just like the daily bread for the hired men and maidservants, and no one spreads out his arms to me. But when some gossip comes here from town, she is immediately received with all honours. And so it is now with the foolish Talia who received her life from me. You practically crawl to her with all the attention you give her. Me, the giver of life, you hardly notice. Now tell me, is that right? Am I not more than some stupid city gossip, and not more than Talia? Oh, rejoice, all of you, who will one day be my followers and servants, for as it now happens to me, so will it also happen to you. Your patrons put you in a corner with the garbage when they are visited by their gossip brothers and gossip sisters." These words went deep into Mary's heart, and thereafter she paid close attention to them. Chapter 202. Worldliness, the enemy of the inward life. Following these words, James also bent down to the little child and inquired of him, "Listen, my beloved Jesus, my tender little brother. Once you become critical, it is almost impossible to put up with you. Would you not like to give me such a reprimand as you just gave Mother Mary? You undoubtedly can do it, but then I shall also sulk against you because you did not invite me to the game, since I would have taken part in it with all my heart." Here the little child said, "Oh, do not be concerned, James, that I shall say anything to you, for your constant attentiveness to me is well known to me. Besides, we quite often share the same fate, and there you are no better off than I am. See, when you oftentimes go out with me and then carry me home again, sometimes all the way from the city, when you have something to do there, and then take me with you, no one comes to meet us. We leave without any other company, and when we come home again, not a soul comes to receive us. As we went forth alone, so also do we come back alone. And if we now and then come a quarter of an hour too late, we get a good dressing down also. And when we are at home, we may not even stir if we do not want to be scuffed. And as much as is sometimes talked about, all manner of things, say whether we are also counted among the interesting things which might be considered worthy of mention with a few words during the day. But when some acquaintance from the city sends word and says, "I shall visit you on Monday," our house already looks forward to it 3 days in advance and talks about it afterward for another 3 days. And when the friend comes, everything runs to meet him, and when he leaves, he is accompanied to the door of his house. But when we come and go, not a cat in the house stirs. Instead, the word is, when such a nimble-tongued city gossip comes here, "James, you had better go outside now with the little child." And then we promptly go outside by ourselves, and may not come back until it has pleased the gossip to depart, accompanied by the entire house. Only when Cyrenius or Jonathan comes do we also count a little, if important considerations do not hinder it. So do not worry that I shall say something to you which could hurt you, for we both are truly treated the same as concerns esteem and love. If we do not stir during the whole day nor open our mouths, then we are well behaved, and this well behaved is in fact our whole reward. Are you satisfied with that? I am not. When Joseph and Mary heard this, they were both afraid. But the little child put them at ease and admonished, "Just a little improvement in the future. The past is over and done with." And James wept from great joy in his heart. Chapter 203. The difference between a mask and prudence. Thereupon Joseph called the little child over to himself and said to him, "I would like to be heard now, but what I have to say I do not say because of you, but because of those who are here. For I know that you always discern my most secret thoughts. So I do not need to say anything to you. But I will say it to you, so those who are here may know what is in my heart. Now it is true that we were often as if indifferent towards you outwardly. But this indifference was only a mask of our inward love and respect for you, so you would not become known to the cruel world. Who indeed knows the world better than you? Therefore no one but you will better realize that our up to now outward conduct towards you had to be thus so we could feel certain that we would not betray you. Therefore, I ask you to forgive us in those instances where our hearts seemed to be cold, but which nonetheless always glowed like the rosy dawn when we beheld you. And be assured that in the future we will also conduct ourselves toward you before others, as our inward urge will tell us to do. After thus being spoken to, the little child replied, "Joseph, you have spoken truly, but there still is a great difference between a mask and prudence. A mask makes the heart cold, but prudence warms it. Why then a mask when prudence is sufficient? Why a pretense when one's natural wisdom offers 1,000 protective measures? Am I not the Lord whom the whole endless creation must obey at a nod because it is nothing other than a thought firmly held in my mind and exists as a spoken word from my mouth? And since I am the sole and only true Lord, how then should the masking of your heart be more effective toward my protection from the world than a whole world filled with my eternal power? Behold, one breath from my mouth, and the entire visible creation ceases to exist. Do you then suppose I have need of a mask over your feelings to protect myself and you from the persecutions of the world? Oh no, of that I have no need. For I do not keep myself hidden from the world because I fear it, but only to avoid a judgment which would befall the world if it recognized me in its iniquity. Hence all of you should indeed be prudent in the future, so you will not bring a judgment on the world. But do not approach me with a mask, which even in its best form is an offspring of hell. And you, Mary, return to your first love, or you will have much sorrow to endure some day, because you now treat me coldly by masking your heart for the sake of the world. This word broke Mary's heart, and she seized the little child with all the power of her love, and pressed him to her heart, and caressed him with the greatest ardour of her motherly love. Chapter 204. The Parable of the Wise King. When Mary had caressed the little child for a while, she asked him quite fearfully, "My Jesus, will you really love me, your handmaiden, as much in return as your handmaiden will eternally love you?" And the little child smiled at Mary in a most friendly way and answered, "Now that was indeed a frail human question. If I did not love you more than you love me, verily, verily, what would you be? Behold, if you loved me with the fire of all the suns, your love would still be nothing against that love of mine, with which I love even the most wicked human being in my anger. And my anger is in itself more love than your greatest love. What all the more then is my actual love which I have for you? How indeed would I ever have chosen you as the one to give me birth if I had not loved you, more than eternity will ever comprehend? See how humanly frail your question is. Now I say to you, go and bring Talia, for I have some very important matters to discuss with her." Here Mary quickly obeyed and brought the wife of Cyrenius. When Talia quite fearfully stepped into the side chamber where the little child sat up and addressed Talia as follows: "Talia, whom I have recalled to life, listen. Once there was a great king who was single and full of manly grace and filled with divine wisdom. This king said to himself, 'I will go and seek me a wife in a strange land where no one knows me. For I want to take a wife for my own sake, and the woman shall love me because I am a wise man, but not because I am a great king.' Thereupon he departed from his kingdom into a faraway, strange land, and came into a city where he soon became acquainted with a house. The daughter of the house was chosen, and she was filled with joy, for she soon recognized the great wisdom of her suitor. And the king thought, 'Now you do indeed love me because you see me, and my form and my wisdom captivate you. But I want to see whether you really love me. Therefore, I shall disguise myself as a beggar and bother you thus from time to time. But you shall not know nor have reason to suspect, that I am incognito in the beggar. The beggar, to be sure, shall carry a token of me as if he were my intimate friend, but otherwise poor in this alien land like his friend. And it then shall become manifest whether this daughter really loves me. And as the great king had thought the matter through, so also did he promptly carry it out. After a while, since the king had seemingly gone on a journey, the beggar came to the daughter and said to her, "Dear daughter of this wealthy house, see, I am very poor and know that you possess great riches. I sat at the gate as your glorious betrothed went on a journey and asked him for a charity. Thereat he stopped and said, 'Friend, I have nothing here that I could give you except this keepsake from my betrothed, who is very rich. Go to her soon and show this to her in my name, and she will give you what you have need of as surely as she would give it to me. And when I shall speedily return, I shall make everything good to her 1,000-fold.' When the daughter heard this, she was full of joy and imparted to the beggar. Thereat the beggar left and returned in a few days and had himself announced to the daughter. The daughter sent him word to call another time, since she now had company. The beggar came another time and had himself announced. There it was said, 'The daughter has gone out with a few friends,' and the beggar sadly turned back. As he, while leaving, came to the house door, he was encountered by the daughter in the midst of her friends, but she hardly paid any attention to him. The beggar, of course, inquired, 'Dear betrothed of my friend, how can you love him when you do not hear his friend?' But the daughter replied, 'I want amusement. When your friend returns, I shall no doubt love him again.' Thereupon the beggar again went to the daughter the following day and found her full of gaiety, for she had a very lively company. And the beggar asked her, 'Do you really love your betrothed, and are so gay since he is away in matters concerning you?' At this the daughter conveyed the beggar outside and retorted, 'That is asking too much. Is it not enough if I love him when he is here? Why should I also love him in his absence? Who knows whether he loves me?' Here, the beggar tore his outer garment, threw it from him, and declared to the astonished daughter, 'See, he who was on a journey was always here to observe your love. But you hardly thought of him, and he who showed you the token of your oath was rejected and ridiculed, since the company of the world suited you better. And behold, the same is none other than he who now stands before you, and is that great king to whom all the world belongs. And the same now gives back to you 1,000-fold what you gave him. But to you he turns his back forever, and you shall never see his face. Talia, do you know this king and this beggar? See, it is I, and you are the daughter. In the world you shall be happy. But this parable tells you what will be afterwards. I gave you life and great happiness, and you are capable of forgetting me? O you blind-born Romaness! I gave you light, and you did not recognize me. I gave you a husband from the heavens, and you wanted to take that part of his love which belonged to me for yourself. Thereat you died. I have reawakened you, for which you accepted the homage of the world and paid no attention to me. And now that I had you called, you quake before me like an adulteress. Tell me, just what shall I do with you? Shall I continue to beg before your door? No, that I shall not do, but I shall give you your portion, and then we shall be quits. These words filled the entire house of Joseph with dread. Hereupon the little child requested to go out into the open with no one but his James, and did not return until late in the evening. Chapter 205. The repentant Talia is forgiven. Only after a while did Talia recover from the shock which these words had given her, whereupon she began to weep bitterly and said, "O Lord, why did I one day receive sight in this house? Why did I become the wife of Cyrenius? So I now, in my supposed good fortune, must suffer so much. Why did you awaken her who was dead? Why did life again have to return into my breast? Was I then born for torment? And why must I be the one, while thousands live peacefully and happily and hardly know anything about the tear which anguish presses from my eye?" Hereupon Mary, stirred by compassion, consoled Talia with the following words: "Talia, you must not contend with the Lord, your and my God. You see, it has ever been the way of the Lord, that he subjects the very ones whom he loves to quite strong trials. Recognize this in your heart and awaken your love to him anew. And he will quickly forget his threat and will receive you anew into his grace. For quite often indeed has he threatened the doers of evil, and has had their destruction declared to them for the following day by the prophets, and designated the spot where the dogs should lick up their blood. But if the evildoer repented, he promptly spoke to the prophet, 'Do you not see that he does penance? Therefore I will not punish him either.' When Jonah was called of God to declare destruction to the Ninevites, who had become enmeshed in all manner of sins, he did not want to go there, for he said, 'Lord, I know that only very seldom do you let follow what the prophet must threaten. Hence I do not want to go there, so I, as a prophet, will not come to shame before the Ninevites when you will surely have compassion with them again.' See, even this prophet placed a well-founded doubt on the anger of God. Now I would advise you, do what the Ninevites did, and you will again be received into grace." These words gave Talia new courage, and she began to examine herself, and soon found a great many faults within herself, and admitted, "O Mary, only now do I realize, and it becomes clear to me, why the Lord does thus chastise me. See, my heart is full of sins and full of impurity. Oh, how will I ever be able to cleanse it again? How then can I dare to love the Holy One of all holiness with a most impure heart?" And Mary replied, "That is just why you must love him in the repentant acknowledgement of your guilt. For only such love alone will cleanse your heart before him, the Holy One of all that is holy." When, late in the evening, the little child entered the house again with his James, he at once went to Mary and requested something to eat. And Mary promptly gave him some bread, butter, and honey. Thereupon he said, "I now see another food. Give me to eat of that too." See, it is Talia's heart. Give it to me, since you have already prepared it for me." Here Talia fell down before the Lord and wept. At this Mary said, "O Lord, have mercy on the poor one who suffers much." And the little child stated, "I have long ago had mercy with her, or I would never have awakened her. Only it was she who would not take any notice of my mercy, and would rather contend with me in her heart than to receive me into it. But since she has now turned her heart to me, I have done to her as to the Ninevites." After these words, the little child went over to Talia and said to her, "Talia, see, I have now become very tired. Once you carried me upon your arms, and it did me good, for you have very soft arms. Therefore arise this time also, and take me upon your arms, and feel how sweet it is to have the Lord of life upon your arms." This request of the little child fully broke Talia's heart. With her heart's greatest possible love, she took the little child on her soft arms, and while weeping, asked, "O Lord, how is it possible that you are now so gracious to me after your terrible threat?" And the little child answered, "Because you put the old Talia, who was repugnant to me, away from you and put on a new one, esteemed by me. But be quiet now, for I do indeed love you again." And all those present were stirred to tears at this scene. Chapter 206. The Three Tears Acceptable to God. Now the longer Talia held the little one on her arms, the more she recognized the mistakes she made in her life, and therefore wept much from time to time. Here the little child sat up and said to Talia, "Listen, my dear Talia, that is something I also do not like about you, that you are constantly weeping now when, after all, you have me upon your arms. Be glad now and rejoice. For I take no pleasure in the tears of mankind when they fall where there is no need of them. Do you really suppose that your tears will cleanse your heart of all sin before me? Oh, that is a foolish thought. The tears do indeed glide over your cheeks and dim your eyes, which is even harmful to you. But the tears do not glide over the heart, and do not cleanse it either. Instead, they often cause it to become sealed up, and then neither anything good nor bad can enter into it. And behold, that also brings with it the death of the spirit, which lives in the heart. For a sorrowful person is always an offended being, and as such is not receptive to anything. Only 3 tears have I laid into the eye of man, and these are the tear of joy, the tear of pity, and the tear of pain. These alone do I care to see. But the tear of sorrow, the tear of regret, and the tear of anger, which tears arise from false sympathy for oneself, are fruits of one's own fundamental ego and have little value with me. For the tear of sorrow springs from an offended heart and demands consolation. If this is not forthcoming, such an emotion is easily changed into secret anger and finally into a feeling for revenge. The tear of regret is of similar origin and only appears after a sin has been committed if the sin has afterwards drawn a chastising lesson with it And then it did not fall because of the sin, but only because of the chastisement, and therefore also because of the sin, since this brought the chastisement with it. This tear also does not make the heart better, for then man does not flee sin because he loves me, but because he fears punishment, and that is worse than the sin itself. And as concerns the tear of anger, it just is not worth my speaking one word about it, for it is a fountain from the pit of hell. Of course, it is not this tear which now moistens your eye, but only the tear of remorse. So I say to you, dry this tear from your eyes also, for you can see that it does not please me. Here Talia wiped her eyes dry and said, "O Lord, how infinitely wise and good you are! Oh, how happy and glad I could be if I were no sinner! But while in Rome, I worshipped an idol at the word of the emperor, and this continues to torment me in my heart." And the little child replied, "I already forgave you that long before you did it. But you were jealous of the love which Cyrenius had for me, and that was a gross sin. I have now forgiven you everything, and you have no more sin because you love me again. So be glad and full of good cheer." At this, Talia and the others again were full of good cheer, whereupon they all went to the evening meal.